Hi, Mike.
Hey, Julian. Hey, quick question for you. Have you ever tried fermenting anything?
Well, not really, unless you count that mystery jar on the back of the fridge. But our guest today knows all about it. We've got Jackie Brearley coming on.
Well, let's bring her in and start rambling.
Hey!
Hi, I'm Mike Brampton.
And my name is Julian Hoad.
Welcome to Veterinary Ramblings.
Jackie Brearley, Mike wants to ask you a question.
God's sake.
I couldn't do it. I'm sorry.
Jackie, what's your favourite bread?
Oh, that's easy. That's sourdough. Sourdough when with a little cracked rye, preferably through it with some seeds, but definitely on top.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay. I think sourdough is definitely coming through on top here, isn't it? As our favourite.
I think so.
Do you have a name for your ferment?
No. The same way I don't name my car or my push bikes or...
Okay. I thought you did name your bicycle.
No, they're just called by their manufacturers' names.
Ah.
There was I never know how to pronounce it. Is it Murdia? And the electric bikes are Ribble.
You got an electric bike?
I have the most gorgeous electric Ribble gravel.
Awesome. Well, I'm intrigued by it, that you've got this electric bike, Jackie. Now, you and I have known each other for very many years, but I also remember you training for marathon running. And
Yes.
you've run a couple of marathons.
Yeah.
And you and I have been out for bicycle rides around Cambridgeshire.
We have.
And you didn't have an electric bike then.
No, I've still got that bike. They're both red.
So you got into marathon running when you were 60, is that right? Or you got into...
No, sort of. I trained for the Nice Cannes Marathon in 2008. And then I did the Great Eastern Run, the half marathon at Peterborough, as a training run about 3 weeks before the actual day, and got a stress fracture in my tibia. That was out. Then I just did bits of running, and then I had a nervous breakdown. In the recovery from that, started running a bit more seriously, and then CAMVET, the charity associated with Cambridge University Vet School, had places at the 2018 London Marathon, so I entered that for my 60th birthday.
Wow.
Wow.
And what sort of times did you get?
Now, let's just go back a bit
Great.
and say that I entered the marathon wanting to finish in under 6 hours, not injuring myself, and not finishing saying I'm never going to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
And I did all those things. I did it in 5 hours 56 or something. And I went on to do that was in the April, and then I went on to do another marathon, the Suffolk Coast Marathon, in the September, I think it was, after the London Marathon. The next day I went to the yoga class and I was fine.
I did a 10K run about 20 years ago, having not run at all for 10 years, and couldn't walk for 3 days afterwards. And I'd worn my nipples completely off because, rightly or wrongly, I'd done it in a veterinary nurse dress. Wrongly, I'll admit now.
No, I pared everything back to not minimalist, but certainly sensible.
Let's say the word pare things back after I'm talking about
it still hurts, does it?
terrible memories. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, for some unknown reason, I stayed with, I know why I did it. I stayed with friends on the City Island, and we walked to the start. So there was 10K before we started the marathon.
Whoa.
Yeah, I still can't quite understand.
It's a warm-up, isn't it?
Warm up, yeah. Warm up. Anyway.
I think it's brilliant. That's a real achievement, isn't it? Because a lot of people do marathons now. It's yeah, it's just a marathon, or it's just the London Marathon, or whatever. But every single person that steps foot over that start line with a view to getting to the finish, that takes a lot of guts and determination.
It's mainly head stuff, though, isn't it, Mike? If you can run a mile, you can run a marathon, to be honest.
So.
That's what somebody told me once. I think it's true, actually. I think it's true.
I think you are being a little self-depreciating of your achievements on that one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad I did it. And it was mentally tough because I wasn't fully recovered. Well, I still had signs connected with my nervous breakdown. I was very noise sensitive, and running the London Marathon is not the environment if you're noise sensitive. So it was a bit, I found it, I hated it. Not because of the physicality of it, it was just of the surroundings and not nice. Whereas the Suffolk Coast Marathon was blissful because I ran that mainly by myself and it was mainly off-road.
Right. And presumably you didn't have the crowds.
No, no crowds whatsoever.
See, during my first degree down in Plymouth, I'd go on 5-mile runs a couple of times a week. And about once a month, I'd do a half marathon just by myself around the coast, around Plymouth. And I loved that. I never had any plans or hopes to do a full marathon, and certainly never had any plans to run with other people, because it was, for me, it was the quiet, the solitude.
Yeah.
I love that. Going back though, because you mentioned a couple of times about a breakdown. Do you mind talking about that at all? Or?
No, not at all. I've written about it in the veterinary press, so I can hardly mind talking about it.
Was it due to your work as a vet?
That's actually, that's more difficult than the sourdough question.
Or
the bread question.
Might be, yeah. We were lying when we said the sourdough question was a tricky one.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. I think it was a combination of personality, the job I was in, and other circumstances. So it wasn't just one, and it's never just one thing, I don't think. Because I know the veterinary profession is plagued, I don't think that's too strong a word, plagued with mental health problems. And there are enormous stresses, and I take my hat off to anybody who's frontline GP at the moment. Even being not in the business any longer, my hackles still raise when everybody around me says, I took my dog to the vet, and do you know how much it cost? And that must be so difficult to deal with. But and in addition to that, you look at the sort of people who become veterinary surgeons, who are high achievers simply because they have to be high achievers to be able to get into vet school. There are so many different theories about why we have a lot of problems, but I certainly think veterinary practice at the moment is not an easy place to be.
You were very high up in it. On the veterinary profession, you were getting towards penthouse level.
I don't know about you two, but you never think of yourself in the way that other people see you. To me, I never had a career plan. I never aimed to be a specialist anaesthetist. And by default and time I'd spent in the career rising to the top of that fermentation. So yes, I've had a career that I've really enjoyed and done reasonably well in.
I think we can relate to that, and I think a lot of our listeners would relate to what you say there. I think each of us in this recording have excelled in various ways, and I think each of us would probably say anybody would have done that if they'd had that opportunity or if they'd been in that position.
And there's a little bit of, oh, somebody's going to realise how by the seat of my pants I'm doing this.
What a fraud you are.
Somebody's going to find out one day. I think that's
Exactly.
that's encompassed in one of our favourite topics, which is most of our listeners. It's almost as regular as the bread question is Dunning-Kruger, and the various levels of the Dunning-Kruger work, and of course it's classified as imposter syndrome. But are you a victim of imposter syndrome, Jackie?
I'm sorry for the long silences, but you keep asking all questions. Where I finished my career, I would say no. I was, at various points in my career, I would have said yes. Yeah.
Okay. Let's wind back then. Can we look at that career then, Jackie? Because when you started, you came into a profession that was predominantly male. It was made up of boring white old blokes like me and him. And there you were as a bright young female breaking into this area. You were the first female student at your college? Is that correct?
No, I was in the first intake of females at Sydney, Sussex, yes.
Okay, so you were one of the
first female veterinary student that they'd had there, yeah.
Okay. So what was that environment like?
I didn't enjoy it. Really didn't enjoy it. Nobody really prepared me for Cambridge. And I felt as though I'd been transported into this fairy tale land where there was very little association with reality almost.
In terms of it being a traditional institute, and by traditional, an institute based on time tried and tested traditions.
It was partly that, but and I can relate to that because I'm really interested in history and always have been. I think that unless you know your history, you don't really know yourself, because you should know where you came from in the broadest sense. No, the town itself, anybody who goes into the centre of Cambridge will know that it is it's like going into I don't know, a fairy tale land almost. It's all ever so affluent and lovely. Bearing in mind that my closest town is Newmarket, and I think there are more closed shops on the high street than there are open ones. And it was just that sense of privilege, I think. And not just in the university, but in what I perceived as the town centre itself.
And were you unused to that in your upbringing? Did you come from a privileged or a non-privileged background, or?
Depends who I'm talking to. My grandfather was a road sweeper, and my two aunts worked in factories when they left school. My father was a consultant geriatrician and set up the geriatric service in West Yorkshire. My mother was the same background as her two sisters that went into factories when they left school at the age of 14. She went into being a clerk and then became a nurse and then became a midwife and went to university. So I came from a very comfortable middle class, immediate background. I think that's what you're putting it.
But not Cambridge stock, because in those days it was unusual for women to be.
No, my mother couldn't go to grammar school because they couldn't afford the uniform for her. Her family couldn't afford the uniform. And my father got a place at Selwyn College, Cambridge, but his family couldn't afford him to go to Cambridge, so he went to Leeds University to do his medical degree. Added to which, this is a bearing cell, but we've already talked about nervous breakdown, but my father was diagnosed with cancer when I was about 6 months old, and he was given 6 months to live then.
Oh, gosh.
So my upbringing, although he was a consultant doctor, all the money went into life assurances and making sure that when he died next week, next month, next year, Mum would be comfortable.
Wow.
I never went abroad on holiday with them. We went to holiday cottages that were owned by friends of my father, so they didn't cost anything. That's not true. That's not true. We went to the Buck Inn in Brampton for a holiday. Dad had to go back to Ilkley because he had a meeting. He was taken ill when he went back to Ilkley for the meeting, and Mum and I had to make it down from Brampton down to Ilkley, carrying my father's artificial leg on the bus.
So he'd gone down single leg.
He'd driven down. No, he'd got a spare leg.
Oh, I see. Right.
That's normal, isn't it? That you just have spare artificial legs floating around the household.
I guess so. I've got a week somewhere.
I'm not going to declare what prosthetic I used. That's a mind-blowing story. So why veterinary, Jackie?
Okay, that one's easy.
I'll give you a couple of easy ones and we'll get to it.
I grew up in a medical background.
Right.
I've got nurses, doctors, ambulance drivers, all sorts of people in my relations. So there was a caring background, and I would worship my father, so being medical was ideal. I wasn't socialised as a child, and my only friends were animals. So there was cats, dogs, chickens, horses. And I'd never really had any human friends until I was probably about 5 or 6, which is late for socialisation. And so I didn't really get on with people. So that was the next best thing.
Yeah.
You know, you want to look after your friends, and my friends were animals.
When did that course start?
Probably about 3 or 4.
Really? As early as that? Primary school, you weren't going to be a ballet dancer, you were going to be a vet.
Oh, I did ballet as well. I did ballet until I was 17. But no, I was always going to be a vet. But the school decided, because I was the first person to apply to Cambridge or for veterinary medicine, I think, ever from the school. They said, don't worry, if you don't get into veterinary school, I'm sure you could be accepted to do an HNC in agriculture. And that was the careers advice I got.
Okay, very supportive. So you've always been a trendsetter then?
I don't know. I feel a bit of a trendsetter now because I really feel as though I'm getting in at the start of something really exciting.
Okay. The sourdough gave us a great hint towards that in growing cultures and stuff like that. What are you getting into now?
Wild ferments. Yeah, I make some kombucha for my own consumption, some kefir for my own consumption, but basically wild ferments. Wildness. Yeah, wildness.
So for our listeners, what is a wild ferment?
A wild ferment is basically enticing yeast and bacteria that are in the environment around us, on our hands, on the food we eat, and persuading that to multiply. So you take down the pH in the environment that you've created for your vegetables down to a pH whereby the nasty bacteria, things like E. coli and I don't know, salmonella and stuff like that, can't grow. Okay. So that is the safety point of view. I like the idea that you're using organisms in your own environment. You're exposed to pathogens in your environment, so why not use healthy, nice bacteria, or healthy for us bacteria, for our own environment to counter the nasty ones?
And are they just bacteria?
Or bacteria, yeasts, fungi.
But you never buy cultures in?
No, I've never bought any culture. So my sourdough culture is one that persuaded a few nice yeasts to join the party. Same with the ferments. And the kombucha and the kefir, I was given those cultures because they're quite specialised cultures. They're symbiotic conglomerations of bacteria and yeast, very quite specific ones.
Yeah, yeah. And some of them have been going for many years,
Mm.
they say. Do you ever send your cultures off for typing? Just out of interest.
No, that is quite interesting. Go on.
Is that cheating?
In what way?
Well, because then you'll know exactly what you've got in the pot.
I would do for that culture, but I don't know for the next culture. Might be different for the next culture.
You're not keeping the cultures going.
No, when you do a lacto-fermented culture, it is de novo every time, unless you do this thing which I can't, every time I say it, I grin. It's called backslopping.
Yeah.
And you take
exactly as
the
it's
liquid from a previous culture and put it into the next culture.
Right.
I don't do that in general.
Why not?
Why not?
Oh,
Why bother? They seem to take care of themselves quite happily.
and also you can get preferential growth of certain subtypes of bacteria, which tends to reduce the richness. A primary ferment is always the best.
Yeah. Oh, I need to talk to you properly, Julian, about this. You're obviously an aficionado of fermentation.
I do kind of like it.
He's just a fun guy.
There's just something really grounding and intriguing about putting some salt and some vegetables together and creating this amazing tasting, bubbling food. It just blows my mind every time I go and listen to them in the morning, and they make these squeaks and bubbles and noises, and I think, oh, you're all okay then. That's fine.
They talk to you.
Yeah.
Talk to you.
And I can't wait to eat you. Doesn't that spoil it somewhat?
No, because the bacteria you're eating are just going to join the ones in your gut that are there already, which totally outnumber your human cells. I find it mind-blowing that we are more non-human cells than we are human cells.
Yeah. Body weight is 58 or so % bacteria.
Yeah. You have all these different microbiomes, so your skin and your nose and your whatever, your gut and your urogenital system or whatever. It's just they have their own little colonies going on.
Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting in that years ago we thought some of these are helpful. Some of the gut bacteria will help us break down and absorb nutrients. Some of the skin bacteria will help protect the skin. We didn't quite know how, but we thought they're probably going to. Let's be fair on them. But yeah, there are nasty ones. It's only recently that we've begun to see that actually some of them are hugely important in all aspects of our life, not only our medical life, our immunological life, but our psychological life as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We're chatting to Hoad a few weeks back. Listeners may have heard that episode. He was talking about performing fecal transplants to reduce the incidence of epilepsy and looking at metabolomics, so the study of individual organismic makeups of our bodies, tells us a huge amount about how our DNA is replicated, transcribed, and translated into proteins, all of which is affected by what we eat and by the bacteria that live in our guts. So
yeah, it's just, and it's like anything. The more you know, the more you don't know.
Absolutely.
So many.
I love kombucha. I drink. I was going to say drink a lot of it. It's pretty expensive, so unless you make it yourself, it's always pretty expensive. I
have a confession to make. I've never actually bought any fermented things like that.
Your pantry is full of your own.
I do have a fridge full, but it's not that full. And we had one of the local chefs put on a tasting menu featuring a lot of my ferment, a different ferment for each course. But the star of the evening was a mint sorbet floating on mint kombucha.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is stunning. Absolutely stunning. Really good.
Well,
what got you into this then, Jackie?
I can probably tell you a timeline which really doesn't help or doesn't really explain it. I think it's more a gradual realization and conviction that as humans, we are a very small part of a biosphere. I don't know a better way of putting it. And how we behave in that biosphere has enormous knock-on implications for the rest of the biosphere. And I think it's incredibly important not to disrupt. It's like having a neighbour that is really noisy and disruptive and potentially aggressive. I don't want to be that nasty, aggressive neighbour to this other species floating around me or being around me. So that I think is the sort of almost the starting point. And then when you look to see what rubbish we eat in general, I'm horrified.
What sort of rubbish in particular?
The ultra-processed food. It's that adage that if you look at a list of ingredients on a package, and I have problems with having stuff in a package anyway, but if you look at the list of ingredients on a package and you don't recognise stuff, there's stuff on there that you don't have in your own pantry or you don't recognise as a food, I don't think that's good for those little guys that are living inside us.
If you have to chemically manufacture part of your food, there's a point at which it becomes not food, but a mixture of nutritional chemicals, which if you want to go down that route, fine, but it's not.
It's not going to do us any good in the long run. Just have to look at the instance of chronic disease, chronic inflammatory disease, and that's another area which is just mind-blowing. The idea that an inflammatory state is behind so much of our modern disease problems, including ADHD and autism and I
read somewhere, now I haven't, to my embarrassment, I haven't checked the veracity of this, truth of this, but I read somewhere that the majority of a plant-based meal, plant burgers and things like that, are ultra-processed.
Yeah, they're more processed, I think, than
a slab of beef or a pork chop.
Yeah.
Clearly, a slab of beef or a pork chop. It seems odd that people often choose a plant-based diet to be healthy. They then use ultra-processed forms of plant-based meals to have a tasty, healthy meal, where actually they could just have a jolly nice southern if they want to go lazy, roast a cauliflower if they want to get some better taste in it, or just lactose ferment some vegetables, which they retain their vitamins, retain their nutrients, they last longer, sometimes well over a year.
Don't even get, I'm just doing my health and safety risk assessment for the new business, and it's, what is your expected shelf life of your product? Don't know. That's an interesting one.
10 years?
No, you're not allowed to put things like that down. But, it's trying to find a sort of compromise.
But essentially, some of what you're doing is essentially pickling or preserving.
Oh, it's preserving. Yeah. Every culture throughout the world uses fermentation of one sort or another for preservation, or they did do prior to refrigeration and freezing.
There's evidence going back, I don't know, 8,000 years or so, 10,000 years, suggests that the fermentation to preserve is going on then.
And so much of our food is fermented. So you've got the bread, you've got beer, you've got wine, you've got chocolate, you've got coffee, you've got tea. And those are just the things on the supermarket shelves. And then you get back down to sauerkrauts and kimchi and miso and
soy sauce. Tasty things, in fact.
Yes. That sixth taste, isn't it? Umami.
Yeah. Okay, so hang on. You've raised a question there yourself, Jackie, because you've said that you're going through a procedure to assess the longevity of the products that you're producing. What are you doing with this? And why are you going through this procedure?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's causing me so much stress. The story is that I started making ferments. I've treated myself to 2 weekend courses or day courses at River Cottage.
Yes.
At the River Cottage Cookery School on fermentation. If you're going for how did you get into it, that was part of it.
Okay.
And that was about the time I stopped being vet last June.
Right. Okay.
And I started making ferments. And then people would say, oh, you're making ferments. Could I have some, please? So there are a group of about 3 or 4 people that I let have some ferments every now and then. And then some people started saying, we'd like to have some ferments, but we don't know what they taste like. So if you tell us that there's I don't know, carrot and lovage kimchi, we don't really understand what that is. So I put on a couple of lectures at the local village hall on, I call them talk and taste lectures. Drawing on the clinical skills background, you get people doing exercises and which foods have fermented and or whatever, and then can you taste and then tasting them and doing tasting notes and things. And then a few more people said, oh, we'd like some ferments as well. And then it became evident that it's actually illegal. This sort of thing. You are supposed to have a environmental health inspected environment produced food if you're going to supply other people, whether you charge them or whether you don't charge them.
But you gave me that wonderful bottle of chutney and it was fabulous.
So that's why I'm actually going through the hoops of setting up a business. So it's legal.
That's through environmental health, or?
You've got to have it, when you go into any cafe, they have a star rating. And it's basically, you register your business, within 28 days, the environmental health officer has to come and inspect, and they will give you a rating and then suggestions how you can improve if you need to improve.
Okay, but if you implemented, for example, ATP testing to show your hygiene rating, surely it would automatically fail because the thing that you're testing for is what you are producing. So how does that work?
We found bacteria. Yeah, it's supposed to.
The thing is that you've got to show it is at a sufficiently low pH that bacteria will not grow in it.
Okay.
And I took delivery yesterday of a pH meter. So I'm really excited.
Actually, at this stage, I should say, if anyone at home is thinking, this food sounds delicious, let's try and make some, it is very easy to go wrong.
Is it?
Is it?
It is. It's easy enough to get it right and get something reasonably tasty. It is very easy to go wrong if you omit certain steps. And the most basic test is pH testing.
I do actually agree. I do say to anybody who has any ferments from it, if it doesn't smell right, if it doesn't look right, and if you have a little bit of a taste, and if it doesn't taste right, just check it out. Okay. It's not worth risking it.
No, and you're essentially creating a huge vat of bacteria. With a low pH, they are almost always going to be acidophilic bacteria that are harmful.
Yeah.
But unless you actually go to that important step of testing the pH, then you could be having a vat of E. coli.
Yes.
So do please look into some basic texts at least, or go on
Exactly. Having said that, as long as you ensure that you have a salt content of at least 2% weight, then it's actually quite difficult for the nasty bacteria to grow in that salinity.
So if you're going to do something, for example, with cabbage, and you've got 100 grams of cabbage, make sure you've got 2 grams of salt in there.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing that is really important is that it's an anaerobic process. So you've got to ensure that all your vegetable matter is well submerged underneath the saline liquor. And if it's poking up, you'll probably get mold. And it's actually becomes quite obvious if it goes wrong.
Yeah, if it's furry, it's wrong. Unless you put something furry in to start with, which you shouldn't really do.
I can't really think of anything furry.
Lactase.
We're not talking about sort of French cheese furriness or anything like that. We're talking about fresh fruit and vegetable fermentation.
I was being a little facetious there. I love fermenting food. And Charlie does too, one of the other producers of the program. So we often have chats about what we're fermenting.
So what have you got on the bubble at the moment?
Nothing at the moment. Most recently, it's one of my old favourites, but she's cauliflower. Love it.
I've got a cauliflower and broccoli kraut on the go at the moment that's got a little bit of beetroot in, so it's a lovely pink colour.
Wonderful. Did you try it with chili? Cauliflower and chili.
Chili and I have this uneasy relationship. Have we got time for a story?
Go on then.
Okay.
The whole Veterinary Ramblings is a story, Jackie.
Right.
I thought,
yes.
I will get some chilies from the South Devon Chili Company.
Oh, I love the South Devon Chili Company. They are rather strong, aren't they?
What's not to like about the South Devon Chili Company? Apart from the fact that they rate California Reaper chilies, I think, and I don't quote me on this, but I think it's got the same sort of number of chilies after it as Scotch bonnets.
Yeah, actually, it's 1,000,000 times stronger given the Scoville scale.
Exactly. Yes.
So
when you start preparing California, 500 grams of California Reaper chilies.
500 grams?
Without any protection on your face, your mouth, or your hands.
It could cause blistering.
Then it didn't actually cause blistering, but my hands were throbbing for about 2 days afterwards.
Not surprised. I eat any number of Scotch bonnets, love them, absolutely fantastic. The Reapers, I do actually wear gloves for, and that's about the only time I use a glass chopping board, which is easier to clean than my usual wooden one.
Yes. Yeah. It was I think one of the most unpleasant experiences I've had. Because I made the really stupid mistake of washing my hands and then doing that. Yes. And I couldn't see for half an hour.
Yeah.
It's just, if anybody ever wants any very hot chili sauce from me, I only let them have it in like 10 ml aliquots with a health warning. Yes, I've learnt a lot. It has been a very interesting learning curve doing ferments.
Okay, so you're turning this into a business then?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you market these chili ferments? Do you put them in a syringe?
No.
Oh. Well, I was just thinking you just draw 10 ml. There you go. And then you've already got the sort of the health implication and warning there by the fact that it's a medical device.
It's quite interesting. Not many people actually ask for the very hot chili sauce.
I wonder why.
I don't know. The idea is I will do it by subscription.
Okay.
And so I will let people know on a Sunday what I've got available. They'll put their orders in on Monday or Tuesday, and I deliver on the Tuesday, Wednesday. So very local.
Okay.
Preferably delivering by my electric bike.
Ah, little trailer on the back of it.
yeah, that sort of idea.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I wish you the very best of luck. Will you have plans, or do you have plans to make it a nationwide or international thing if it kicks off? Staff of 30? There's now I'll
I can't get 30 people in my kitchen.
You franchise it.
Listeners,
No,
see Jackie emphatically shaking her head at that.
Part of it is this local thing.
Okay.
Using locally produced organic vegetables. It's a bit like the terroir of wine. If I make a ferment here and take it to Abergavenny, those bugs aren't of Abergavenny. So it's settling yourself in your environment, which includes the bacteria around you.
It's the same theory as local honey, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, exactly the same, Julian. Exactly the same. Yeah.
There's also, which gets back to one of the ideas of the healthy values of lactated foods. You mentioned immune systems earlier, and it's thought and hoped that a bit like honey, fermented foods can reduce allergic potential of certain individuals if they're fed lactic or lactose fermented foods at a young enough age.
I've just tried to find any papers on the introduction of lacto fermented foods to young children, and I can't find any. Now, I haven't gone through my usual PubMed investigations. I haven't really found anything, and it's an area that is just, which is why I think it's so exciting. It's an area which is just really beginning to be investigated and starting to be questioned and understood. You talk about allergies, but you do have to be a bit careful. I am a bit cautious about saying to people who are immunocompromised,
yes,
for whatever reason,
they potentially shouldn't have
have live ferments. And the other people are people who are sensitive to histamine, because histamine's produced in the ferments as well, particularly with sauerkrauts. It can have quite a lot of histamine in from the cabbage. So I that would be my health warning. And the other thing is not to think, oh, fermented food's really good for me, I'll have a meal of fermented foods. And never having had them before, I think you'd feel pretty rough doing that.
At the very least, you'd be bloated.
Exactly. So you need to introduce, like any change of diet, you need to introduce you wouldn't take it's the same idea as having a massive group of people, and then you go into a party of 10 people and expect everything to be happy. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And everybody wants to run a marathon, but you don't just go out and try and run a marathon, do you? You start by running around the block first.
Yes.
And build up to it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I sense there, and like I can feel there's an element of conflict, shall we say, whereby we know that this stuff is good, and we know that sometimes because of the way we have been brought up or we live our lives, we're not getting enough of this good stuff, and consequently our bodies have rejected that, and we have various problems. And I can sense the caution there of if you started doing this, it might actually solve your problem. However, you've got this clinical symptom here which prevents us from taking that step because there's a risk associated with it. And I think your caution is well founded there against the desire to do well.
I think part of the problem is that we've got such it's a Western society in general have such a dysfunctional gut microbiome that we eat such weird stuff that our poor guts, they don't produce what they're supposed to produce, and in not doing that, we've got leaky guts. So we actually take in a lot of stuff in our food that we're never supposed to have in our bodies, simply because those tight junctions have become all leaky and chronic gut inflammation.
Yeah, which may well be due to the ultra processed foods we have, or maybe a lack of other nutrients that we should have and we've forgotten about, but that other cultures just take in as routine.
The adverts on TV that absolutely terrify me is kills 99% of known germs. Like, how bad is that for us?
It's in these ultra sterile environments that have quite possibly, we don't know yet, but have quite possibly increased the incidence of allergies. Things like that.
Yeah, talking about adverts, I like the one that finishes with "keep away from children." That's a good adage. I can go.
I have this enormous pull to look at my bookshelves, but the book I'm looking at, the ultra processed people, is it, by?
It was one of the twins, isn't it?
Chris Van Tulligan.
Yes.
Yeah, that is just, if anybody wants to horrify themselves, that's a really good book to read.
Let me ask you another question, Jackie, because obviously most of our careers has been veterinary, and so we've crossed paths and walked paths together on veterinary sciences. But you've reached a crossroads now, and you're going off down the fermented foods and the real food exploration path, which is fantastically fascinating. But on Veterinary Ramblings, we've got a thing that we call 60-second CPD.
If you're wanting me to give you 60-second CPD on veterinary anaesthesia, forget it.
Okay.
That's what I've spent all my career doing virtually.
Yeah, but not in 60 seconds.
Not in 60 seconds.
Okay, all right. So you're up for a 60-second CPD challenge on that, yeah? Okay. So what would be the title?
What are you doing to make your fellow species more comfortable?
Okay, so 60-second CPD from Jackie Brearley on what are you doing to make your patients more comfortable, and I will start the clock now.
I think to start with, I would put a plea in for encouraging your clients to bring their animals, as far as possible, we're talking about small animal here, into a practice where they don't have anything unpleasant done to them. They have a nice time. That they come in and they look forward to coming into the vets. And then think about the veterinary, their experience in the practice. Are they taken away from the only person that they've known for most of their lives, who provide them with emotional support, nutritional support and physical support? Have you taken them away from that person, potentially dragged them away and put them in a cage, which they may not be used to do anyway? Have you then inflicted some pain on them by injecting them, by restraining them to inject them against their will? And then have you done something to them and they've woken up, and the only way you can get them, they can get you to give them pain relief is by howling or screaming? Now, I'm painting a very black picture here, but I think if you think, and I'm being very anthropomorphic, but I think we need some of that in our profession, to think about the stages and seeing how you can make your patient more comfortable at each stage, even to include using anti-anxiety drugs before they come into the practice, and ensuring that you provide analgesia and non-pharmacological means of providing comfort post-operatively before the animal demonstrates incredible agony. because we don't know what post-traumatic stress that's causing in our animals. Well, we do, because when they want to come in, when you want them in the next time, they say, no, we're not having it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you corner any animal that says no, they're going to attack you. Because that's the only way they can find a way out.
A terrible time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they can't attack, they'll have a terrible time and feel stressed.
Mm.
I think if I can be devil's advocate, that was a little over the 60 seconds.
That's fine.
But
I think
I was waiting for Mike just to
we were spellbound.
do a song and dance.
Really useful, heartfelt stuff.
I was going to say, it may have been more than 60 seconds, but it's valuable stuff. And it raises interesting questions, doesn't it? Because we, even as a human species, as individuals, we can have shared experiences, but we will still experience those experiences in our own way.
Because we have our own history and we have our own thought processes.
We have our own perceptions. And if somebody is, for example, colorblind, they may learn that a particular shade on the hill is green, but they cannot actually physically experience green. They've just been told that this grass on the hill is green.
Grass is green, yeah.
Grass is green, and that is grass, therefore that is green. And they will quite happily tell you that it's green. Whereas somebody who can actually identify it as green and see it as green will see it in a different way. And if that person has been told that that is purple, then they will see it as purple. But it's interesting. Julian and I have both been doing a bit of work on this, haven't we, Julian? And I think essentially, please correct me if I'm wrong here, to summarize what you're suggesting there is almost the vet professionals not necessarily to walk a mile in their patient's shoes, because that's obviously impossible, but to be more aware of how those patients perceive their world. And I use the expression umwelt. Are you familiar with that, Jackie?
The concept of environment and thought around that. I think the other thing that we need to bear in mind is that animals don't, as far as we know, don't have any perception that present suffering will result in long-term relief.
No,
I think we should really ask ourselves exactly, just because we can do something, should we be doing it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's something that certain agencies use in human areas, normally to extract secrets from enemies, because the person that is being tortured doesn't know that is ever going to end, and they are just in a world of, if not direct pain, discomfort, disorientation, etc. Yeah, very much so. It's very much used in that. And to a certain extent, I know it's a little bit of would be a controversial or extreme view, that potentially we are torturing some of our patients.
I would agree. I've got a little working cocker. Would say puppy, but she's about a year old now.
Oh.
And she has very fixed ideas about what she's going to do when.
Okay.
So when she's a bit fed up and a bit tired. So at dog training last night, we were doing an agility course, and she hasn't done this before, and she absolutely stormed it. It was great. Really enjoyed ourselves. Went in to do some basic obedience work, distance obedience work, and she sat down, curled herself up, looked at me, and then just said no.
Oh, bless her.
I'm not doing this. And it's, oh, please don't show me it. She said, no, I've done enough tonight, thank you. That's fine. We'll go home when you're ready.
And of course, a cat wouldn't even have done it in the first place.
It's that sort of just learning, because they can't verbalise, doesn't mean to say that they aren't talking to us. I am getting it slightly Dr. Dolittle here, but
I don't think so.
We're quite bad at interpreting body language in our patients.
I think, in fairness, there you are a long way from Dr. Dolittle, and that I don't see that as being particularly anthropomorphic either. We as a species just do not seem to understand that we are an integral part of nature and not a separate species away from nature, and we have no right to effectively rule over the domain. We just happen to be lucky enough that we have been able to rule over our domain and our environment, but we are still an integral part of nature.
We think we've been ruling, but all we've been doing is screwing things up.
Yeah, totally.
For everybody else.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you. And listeners to Veterinary Ramblings will know that this is one of our key passions. But I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, Jackie, because in everything you're doing, in your preparation of food and utilizing nature and the natural biome to create and be a part of that small environment, building your own natural umwelt in a gentle way is really admirable.
I can't remember exactly when it was, 2-3 years ago maybe, but I made a pledge to myself to walk as lightly as I can on the world. And you know this thing about when you go camping, you don't leave anything of yourself behind. I feel that very passionate.
Memories, leave only footprints or whatever, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, well, we use that in photography as well. So it's take any photos.
Yeah, and it used to be leave only Kodak wrappings, didn't it? But these days with digital photography, you don't even need to do that.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. It's a question that is regularly asked with the stuff that I do in the Arctic. And we ask, should we be there? And should we be having the animal interactions? And it's quite a conflict when you ask those questions, because technically, no, you shouldn't be there. Leave it. It's wilderness. But if there is nobody there, then how do we document the demise of those wilderness areas and the species that live there to the rest of the world, to tell the rest of the world to stop doing what they're doing? There's a balance.
I'm beginning to think that trying to stop fossil fuel exploitation, those are sticking plasters, and what we really need to do is change ourselves. And
Totally.
until we can change ourselves to work with other species and be empathetic to other species, I don't think we've got a hope.
Is it going to happen? A question for another night.
Well done, Julian. I was about to answer that. And
what isn't a question is the matter of the value you've given us for your 60-second CPD. And it's not a question because there is a huge amount of value. And we're still talking about the ramifications of it 10 minutes after you've done your 60-second CPD. And so I've got a little certificate for you here, a CPD certificate. And it says it's a certificate of fomenting interest by interesting ferments. I have umeboshi there.
yes,
Over my store cupboard, umeboshi, good old Mrs. Elwood's gherkins, sandwich gherkins,
okay,
but still pickled. And this is actually Amita do a pickled tandoori ferment, which is quite nice. And I added some chili sauces there of my from my stock cupboard. I do like chili sauces. There's one in the middle. You can just recognize the Scotch bonnet.
I ought to send you some of my California Reaper
Do
sauce.
I love it. I love it. It'd be great. I do.
Have you got any left over?
I do have some.
I do quite a mean ghost Jaloika and mango chili sauce.
I just joined the Fermenters Guild, and they start talking about ferments I've never come across ever. I feel very, very much a baby fermenter because I'm just talking about different krauts and kimchis, and even my kimchi isn't kimchi.
Yeah, fair enough. All good stuff. So hang on. So we've had CPD, we've had our CPD certificate, but we need a reflection question.
That brings us round to the circle of what you're making, what are you doing to make your patients, if you want it in veterinary terms, more comfortable.
I think you could also ask a second question. Oh, come on, Jackie. Shall I ask it for you?
Go on.
What are you putting in your mouth, and are you really eating real food?
Well, yes, thank you. I haven't been into a supermarket apart from to buy vodka and gin for over 4 years.
You not have any potatoes in your garden?
I'm going to make some elderflower champagne tomorrow. But that aside, it's a hobby horse of mine, of the stranglehold of the big corporates, including the big supermarkets, on our food supplies. If the big supermarkets decided that they were going on strike, we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves.
Well, you would.
Yes, but I know a bit about foraging and preservation, and I'm not averse to scraping things off the road to eat them.
And small holding husbandry, and a whole load of things that we could have talked about, but we haven't.
But if you live in a city and your only food is either takeaway or supermarket,
you're pretty stuffed, aren't you?
Yeah.
Survival of the fittest. There'll just be us country bumpkins left. Hurrah!
But it's so sad.
So-called civilization.
Yeah, and particularly when there are loads and loads of weeds out there that you can eat.
Yes.
That's another whole other topic.
I've often said that I think that the English countryside is so good because you can eat about 20% of it.
Yeah, you need to know what you can't eat.
Yeah.
And that's about it, really.
Yeah. Jackie, thank you so much for talking to us this evening.
It's been fun.
And if our audience have enjoyed listening to Jackie and have any questions or further questions, or have got any ideas that you want us to cover, or any topics that you want to cover, drop us a line at veterinaryramblings.com. And please don't forget to share and do subscribe, because it really does help us. So on that note, Jackie Brearley, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure as ever.
It's been great. Thank you both. I really enjoyed it.
May your dog go with you.
I think they're asleep downstairs.
They'll go with you.
And cut.
Yay!
Oh, Jack's brilliant. Can I ask one last thing, Jackie, before we go? Your business, I see on the notes here, wildly preserved. So if any of our listeners are interested in taking this further and want to get in touch, either via Veterinary Ramblings or direct with Jackie, how would they get in touch with you, Jackie? What's the best way?
My email address is probably the best way.
Okay. We will post that in the links down below and pop that up, veterinaryramblings.com. So if anybody's interested in doing that, tell your friends or log on to veterinaryramblings.com and you'll get all of the details to get in touch with Jackie to find out about her workshops and her mentoring stuff and support. I reckon him and me might sign up already.
Right. Very best of luck with your business.
Thanks. I'll let you know how I get on.
That's brilliant. Thanks a lot, Jack.
Take care. Bye.